So before you watch this episode, I want to make sure that you've watched part 1 of our conversation with Mike Cohen, where we talked about the 3 most important lessons recruiters should remember in 2021. So on today's show, we're continuing that conversation with Mike, and we're talking about how those 3 lessons can be used to reinvent recruitment in the 2020s, considering how different recruitment is from what it was in the 2010s. So what does Mike think about reinventing recruitment? How does he plan on breaking traditional sourcing methods? Stay tuned to find out, because I think you're really going to have fun listening to what he has to say.
What data do I trust? Right? It's when people say like, oh, what's the best sourcing tool? I'm like, that's a dumb question, right? I brought this up with you guys a ton. I brought this up with Nin as well, right? Like, that's a dumb question, right? It'd be like asking a carpenter who builds a house, like, what's the best house building tool? Like, I don't know. What are you doing, right? It's not like one tool that builds a house, right? So I think it's understanding the data is going to be there, and being able to sift through all of the crap data. And then I think the metrics piece is different. I think as we're transitioning from that like late 90s, the early 2000s recruiting feel of like slinging calls, smile and dial, right? We're like, that's how I came up in the space, right? So I get it. But I think we're moving more to hey, how can we do this better, not faster? And I think the metrics piece around that is fundamentally going to be different in what we look for. I think the way that we work is going to be different. My goal in the 2020s, I have now only like 9 years left. I want to fundamentally break the way that people source. I want to break it. So I think it's defunct. I think there's too many different disparate places out there to find data, and some of it's good, some of it's not good, and people don't know kind of where they want to go and what they want to go. And so like for me, it's like, hey, how can I take all of that data and compact it into something useful for me? And also, how can I align my metrics so that I'm focused on doing that instead of delivering a number? And I think once we have the clarity around the amount and the quality of data, which I think we're starting to sift through now in the 2020s and realizing like there's a lot of crap out there, I think the more we'll evolve into how we use that.
Like you said, data is getting, there's data everywhere. We're producing data at, record amounts. The world has never seen this much data before, ever. And it's pretty scary if you think about it, just how much we're actually producing. And as we go into the 2020s, I'm sure recruitment technology will evolve, as it always does. We're going to have new tools pop up, new tools that are constantly innovating things as well. And that's not going to change. I feel like what's going to change is the way, we interact with these tools, the way we use these tools, and, how we fit that into our different processes, our different workflows. How do you think that relationship is?
Yeah, that's the big one. And you hit the nail on the head. I literally could not have said that better. It's not about the tools anymore. It's not a matter of the tool. It's what tool is best for your organization, your location, the type of jobs, the seniority of your staff, and your workflow, right? These don't really change so much. You can't really change your organization, your geography, can't change all of your staff. Your workflow, though, you can change. And so what I try to encourage is like, hey, instead of looking and having a tool dictate to you how you're going to work, you dictate the best way for you to work and then fit your tools within that. And you may be using tools for really weird things, right? Like one of the things we use Hiretual for, which is so weird. And I know that Nin's gonna be like, why'd you say that? But sorry, buddy. One of the things we use Hiretual for is when we import candidates, Hiretual normalizes the data. So it's one of the only tools where when you import stuff, even if it doesn't match up to a profile internally, it still holds that in the project. And when you export, it still pulls that back out. So you don't have to worry about like the order and lining up data and all of that stuff. It normalizes everything for you. And so we actually used it as like a data normalization tool. And it's like,
yes, for everything, these little things. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, well, that's not what Hiretual does. I'm like, false. That is what Hiretual does. It may not be the reason it was created or the reason most people use it, but what do I or you or anybody need to have happen? Forget what this tool does or this where are you here? Where do you need to get here? And then here and then here. And then what can you use to do that?
So what do you think are some things that recruiters should keep in mind to avoid, when they're making these decisions with technology, when they're really trying to implement a very data-driven or a very modernized recruitment process? What are just some things that they need to keep in mind, some mistakes that they should avoid to keep that human process up?
Mm. Yeah, this is going to be weird advice, and again, you guys can punch me after we're done recording. Uh, if you're interested in seeing a product, uh, don't do a full demo and don't do an onboarding or a walkthrough for at least a week. Just play with the tool, play with it, and realize that you don't know how to use it, and that's the best part. That's how we dealt with Hiretual, right? It's one of my guys on my team with no idea how to deal with it. I was like, sorry guys, I don't have time to like jump on and teach you. Just you'll figure it out. And they were like, oh yeah, I could just do this thing, and I'm like, oh, holy crap, you totally can just do that thing, right? But when we take other people's, and that includes mine, right? Like, yeah, fine, watch my tutorials or anything, but like mess around with it first yourself, right? Play around with things, try to break them. It will do you good, and understand that with that is going to come a measure of failure.
Yeah.
Every time you're going to fail, and that's okay. That's totally cool. I guess when looking at adopting, do demos as often as you can, but just ask that you drive. Yeah. Right. So I try to do at least 1 or 2 tech demos every single month. And we jump on and I explain like, hey, can I just kind of walk through and like interrupt and have you do things? They're like, okay. And it's super awkward for the person demoing. So sorry, anybody at Hiretual right now. But like it's an easier way for you to not have to change in your mind the way your process works, but instead focus on this as a tool. Right? Because you're using a nail gun or a buzzsaw doesn't change the thing you're building or the way you build that thing. It just does a part of the job faster or easier or differently.
So yeah, what are you really excited about? What are you looking forward to?
Live conferences be super great. Traveling would be super great. I'm looking forward to furthering this idea of breaking sourcing and the paradigm of the sourcing model. And I'm talking to a few different companies and tech folks to see if we can come up with a better solution to sourcing than having a bunch of disparate systems that kind of talk to each other, but not really. And I'm looking forward to taking all of the camaraderie in the community from 2020 and hoping it branches out, so that I hope that if in 2020 I impacted 3 people in a meaningful way, I hope that in 2021 they impact 3 people in a meaningful way, and we start expanding the community. And so like we're not hearing the same voices, because listen, I love getting on stage and talking, but I love seeing new people get up there and get to flex their voice and share their knowledge and their insight, and I'm really looking forward to what we can build upon from the dumpster fire of 2020.